Hello, I'm Adrian and we're looking at a classic today, London Calling by The Clash. And in case you're wondering, I've not made a deliberately apocalyptic song choice this week. This lesson's actually been in the works for quite some time. So before we go any further, just going to have a play through a bit of the song and you can hear a few of the different guitar parts that are happening. So there we are, that's what we're dealing with today, and I've actually become quite obsessed with this song and the album from which it's taken over recent weeks. It's actually the 40th anniversary of London Calling this year, and I've been revisiting the album. And this track in particular is one of those tracks that it seems very simple on the surface, but as soon as you start looking and listening a bit more deeply, you realise that there's quite a lot more to it than meets the eye or meets the ear. And it's one of those tracks that I think a lot of people tend to get slightly wrong. So this video is my attempt to get to the bottom of things. So I've actually done quite a lot of research to make this video. I've obviously listened to the original recording very carefully, watched a lot of live footage of them playing it, and also managed to track down some isolated guitar stems for this track. You have to dig quite deep on the internet to be able to find them, but that's actually been really helpful, because when you listen to the original recording, the guitars are actually mixed fairly low and it's quite hard to hear the details. But listen to some of these isolated stems and you can actually hear more clearly what's going on. I'm warning you now, things might get a little bit nerdy, but I suppose that's what you've come to expect from my videos. So let's get started. So as I said, there's more going on than you might think with this one. And listening to the original recording, certainly listening to the isolated guitar tracks, you can hear that there are at least 7 or 8 different guitar parts here. Some of them are just straight double tracks, some of them are completely separate parts. So what I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to try and simplify things a little bit. I'm going to break this down into 3 main parts. We've got the Mick Jones rhythm part, which is the main sort of driving force of the song, I think. Then we've got a Joe Strummer rhythm part, and then we've got some lead guitar overdubs and a backwards guitar solo, which I think all of that would have been played by Mick Jones. But let's kick off with this introduction then, and straight away it seems on the surface very simple. It seems like it's just an E minor chord played like this. And I think that's all that the main Mick Jones guitar part is doing. You've got Mick Jones panned hard left and right, and you can just hear an E minor chord. It's an E minor bar chord at the 7th fret, and it's played quite staccato, so you're just releasing pressure after each of these hits, just playing a quarter note rhythm and emphasizing the higher notes in that chord. You can't really hear the bass notes in that, I don't think. So for that guitar part, pretty simple. So at first I thought that was all there was to it, but something was bugging me a little bit. There's something going on that's not quite just an E minor chord strummed all the way through, and it's very hard to hear exactly what it is. But what I reckon is happening is that at the same time as Mick Jones is just holding down an E minor, we've got Joe Strummer, who's actually playing an E minor to an F, which is his guitar part that he's playing in the verse, which we're going to come to. But in the introduction, it's actually very hard to hear that guitar part. It's mixed very low, and you can just kind of hear some overtones. It might just be the reverb return that you're hearing, but you've got this really interesting effect where Jones is playing an E minor, Strummer is playing an F, which is quite a tense and dissonant sound. I guess you'd describe that as a kind of polychord. It's an E minor and an F at the same time. But I think that's what gives that introduction its tension. You've just got this, and then Strummer playing, and put that together with the bass, and it all starts to take shape. Now there's one further guitar overdub that you can hear on the introduction, and that is just this single note, and that's just kind of building up and launching us into the verse of the song. And that's just a G note played at the 8th fret on the B string. You could play it at the 12th fret on the G if you wanted to. That's the same note, but I'm playing it here, and we just, it's all played with that same quarter note staccato rhythm, and we're just building that up. There's a bit of a crescendo just taking us into the verse. Let's come on to the verse then, and this is really carried by the Mick Jones rhythm part. There is a Joe Strummer guitar in there as well, which we'll come on to in a moment, but the main Mick Jones part at the start of the verse goes like this. So it's almost a kind of reggae-ish feel that we've got going on here, and it's based off of this same E minor chord shape. I'm not really hearing the lower notes in that, so I'm really just fretting the higher notes, so that the 9th fret on the D and the G, 8 on the B, 7 on the high E string, and the strumming pattern is this. So we've got a down up with just scratches, then we're squeezing down the chord with another down up strum, and we've got a bit of a swing to this as well. So we've got 3 bars worth of that, and then we're changing to a G chord, and the chord shape that's being used here is derived from this C form bar chord. If you know your caged system, this is the C form. So it's a G chord but in the C form. It's like you're taking a C chord and making it a movable shape. So you've got the root note at the 10th fret on the A, then you've got 9th fret, 7th fret, 8 and 7. And again, I'm not really hearing that low bass note, so I'm just leaving that off and playing the top 4 notes of that chord shape, and it's in the same kind of rhythm. And sometimes you can hear that Jones is adding in this high D note with his little finger, so and that seems to just vary throughout the song. Sometimes he's playing this, sometimes this, but it's the same chord. It's still a G chord because we've got a D here, and we're just doubling it in the higher octave. So the basic verse pattern, then we've got 3 bars rather on the E minor shape, and then 1 bar on the G. And it's important here as well to be aware of what the bass is doing and what the other guitar part is doing. The bass line is something like this. We've got actually a really great bass line if you listen closely to it, and it's kind of implying an E or an E minor to an F, and then going down to a G. So Jones has decided just to stay on that E minor whilst the bass and the other guitar is going to an F, and again that creates a little bit of tension in the song, I think. So back to the Jones verse guitar part, and the verse is 16 bars long, I think, and it's in two halves. The first half has got that kind of reggae-ish rhythm, and then for the second half the rhythm switches to just straight staccato quarter notes. Exactly the same chords. We've got 3 bars on the E minor and then 1 bar on the G, either played like that or like that, and it's just a nice step up in energy, going from that looser kind of swinging kind of down up thing to that all down strokes, more aggressive quarter note part. So that's the second half of the verse. Then we're on into what I'm going to call the chorus of the song, the Ice Age's coming bit, and then it's back to this swinging rhythm, but this time Jones is going between the E minor and the G every bar. So we've got a bar of E minor, so just going back and forth between those 2 chords, and then we're releasing that into a D chord, and I'm really just hearing a triad here. So 7th fret on the G, B, 5th fret on the top string, live by the river, and then we're back to the E minor on into the second verse. Let's talk about the Joe Strummer rhythm guitar part then, and this one is mixed really low. It plays an important role in the song, but it's mixed a lot lower than the Jones part, and all of the guitars generally are mixed quite low in this song, which is dominated by the bass, the drums and the vocals. But the Joe Strummer part is a lot looser and more raw than the Mick Jones part, and he's just outlining the basic chords. I think if you wanted to just play this song in a simple way, just play it and sing along, then this is probably the way that is best to do it. We've got the E minor again, and then we're going to the F. Like in the introduction, we've got 5th string root bar chords, E minor, the F is at the 8th fret there, and then barring at the 10th fret. Back to the E minor, and then we're coming down to a G bar chord down at the 3rd fret. So that's the basic chord pattern. So that's played a little bit more loosely. It's kind of a looser down up strum, little variations in the rhythm that you can hear throughout the song. And again, interesting there how it relates to the bass. We've got E minor to F, that's going with the bass. The bass then goes to G, Strummer goes to E minor, so you've got kind of an implied G6 sound, I suppose. Then the guitar goes to meet the bass down at a G. So you've got a choice how you play the G. I think Strummer uses his thumb over the top of the G chord. You can do that if you're comfortable with that technique, or just play it as a normal bar chord if you want to. Now for the chorus, Strummer is doing something like this. So we're just going from an open E minor chord and just arpeggiating that a little bit if you like, and then to this G bar chord again. We repeat that again. One more bar of E minor. Then we're up to a D chord. It sounds like Strummer is playing a D bar chord up at the 10th fret. The rhythm he's playing is this. So live by the river bit. Then we're back into a little bit of a re-intro. So that's basically what the Strummer guitar part is. So that's fairly simple, just bashing out the bar chords. You can hear on the isolated guitar tracks how hard he's hitting the guitar, because all the strings are kind of going slightly out of tune when he's hitting some of those bar chords, which is great. Let's discuss some of the lead guitar stuff then. And these parts are nice and simple but really effective, just really nicely crafted lead guitar parts. Now in the chorus you've got this part, which is so we've got these big hits on an E minor chord, so it's the same E minor shape that we were using in the rhythm guitar part. It's got a big hit on that, and then we're sliding off, and we're placing that hit on beat 2, so it's 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, and then we've got some double stops, so it's 12th fret on the G and the B, then 11th fret on the G to 10 on the B. So the whole part in time is 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3. And that's just repeating. And then Live by the River, we're playing a single note here, which is this D at the 7th fret on the G string. Just hit that note, let it feed back, and then got this pair of notes leading into the second verse. So this is the 9th fret on the D, 8th fret on the B. Again, just holding that, letting it feed back into the second verse. A few more lead guitar parts you can hear towards the end of the song if you listen closely. We've got just this little 10-9 on the D string to 10 on the A string. And then we've got some more accents on the E minor chord. Sounds like he's occasionally going up to this C major triad or C major 7 chord. That's at the very end of the song. And all that's left to discuss is the guitar solo, which is a backwards guitar solo, which in those days would have been achieved by flipping the tape, recording the guitar solo, and then putting the tape back the normal way round so that the performance played backwards. And because I'm nerdy about this kind of thing, I actually played the song backwards so I could hear what's going on. And it's actually 2 backwards guitar solos, one in the left speaker, one in the right speaker. Let me tell you a little bit about the gear that I'm using today. And in the performance at the start of this video, I actually layered up several guitars to try and give you a bit of the feeling of the original recording. I was using 3 different guitars. For the main Mick Jones parts, I was using this guitar, which is my Shergold Provocateur. Assuming that Mick Jones used a Les Paul on the original recording. I'm not certain about that, but that's certainly the guitar that he's associated with. But this Provocateur certainly does nice kind of Les Paulish tones. I was actually using my Les Paul as well. I was using that for the more distorted, overdubbed lead guitar parts. And then I was using this guitar for the Joe Strummer parts. This is my 52 reissue Telecaster. Again, Joe Strummer associated mostly with the Telecaster. I'm assuming that was what he was using on this recording. Amp and pedal wise, I've kept this all fairly simple. I'm just using my Vox AC30 for all of the guitar tracks. And I'm going through one pedal, which is the J Rocket Designs Archer Overdrive pedal. I'm setting that slightly differently depending on the guitar part and depending on the guitar that I'm using. But that's my basic signal chain. Well, that's it for today. Tab backing track going to be up on my Patreon page. Thanks very much for watching. Take care, and I hope to see you next week.